Alrighty, in the last video we got the front core support bars all welded in, so this thing's actually pretty sturdy. Happy with how this is turning out. Today I'm going to be working on getting the intercooler and radiator mounted in there. So intercooler, so radiator should be pretty straightforward. It's basically just going to be two tabs coming up and then bolting in the top. I might end up welding like a 1/2 inch aluminum tube to the bottom of the studs that are already on there just to get a little bit more length going down into the frame. I did add these little rubber washers on the bottom, but you can see there's not much of a stud sticking out anymore, so I think I might just extend this a little bit so I got more down in the frame and I don't have to worry about it kind of bouncing out or anything. So that should be pretty simple, just two tabs basically on the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and also start working on the intercooler, getting the intercooler placement figured out. On the last video I showed that this little outlet here is actually hitting the radiator, so I was going to cut this thing off and lower it down a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. I'm going to start just by chopping this off. One thing I don't like about it is the way that this tab is mounted on here, or the way that this mounting tab is actually put on here. I feel like it's put on the wrong side. So if this is facing the engine bay, the mounting point is actually on the front of the vehicle, which I feel like I don't really like that. So I think what I'm going to do is chop this off, plate it off, and then I can actually put the outlet on the opposite side, and then I don't have to cut these off and then weld them on the other side, because that was what I was kind of planning on doing. So yeah, I guess if we look at it this way, that's facing the back of the vehicle towards the engine bay. I just feel like these are welded on the wrong side. I feel like they should be on the back side, and that doesn't really make sense to me. So instead of cutting these off and moving those, if I'm already going to cut that off and modify that, I might as well just flip that to the other side anyways. Okay, so one thing I'm going to watch out for here is the depth with the Holley mid-mount accessory drive kit. So I did look at the PDF on the website. It's 7 5/8 of an inch. The nose of the water pump is 7 5/8 from the face of the block. And this one comes out to about 7 1/4. I did put a straight edge on the nose of the pulley there, and it comes out to 7 1/4 depth. So it actually, this part of the pump on the Holley mid-mount only sticks out about another 3/8 of an inch farther than this. The belt position is actually another like 2 inches farther forward, but the nose doesn't really change that much. So I should be good. I just got to keep that in mind when I measure for clearance for the radiator, because I'm going to do a 3-inch pipe. So I got to make sure that I can fit a 3-inch to the intake between here and the radiator fans. So that's a watch out. Let's start working on it. All right, so there's bracket 1 and there's bracket 2. They both look pretty symmetrical. So I think what my plan is I'm going to get the TIG welder over here. I'm going to weld these in, and what I'll do is I'll drill a hole through here, and then I'll probably get like a narrow piece and then bolt it on to the back side of here. So it's kind of bolted onto the front, but then it also has a long piece of flat right behind here about the size of this lip, and then it's also bolted all the way across just to kind of help hold everything down. But for now, this should be more than fine. So what I did was I loosened this up a little bit because these bushings down here do compress a little bit. So I have it lifted up, so then I'll be able to bolt it together and then tighten this thing back down, and it should actually hold this thing down against the frame. Yeah, and then that long piece of flat behind there should help a lot too with, like, when I launch the thing hard, then it's got much more surface area that's actually holding this thing down instead of just relying on that little bolt through this thin aluminum. Then it's got a whole long section that's bolted actually to the core support. Well, and just for reference, what I'm bending those pieces with is just the bench vise on the floor, and I'm hitting it with a dead blow and using an adjustable wrench. So you can see the marks from the clamp there. I just kind of clamped it in, measured it, made sure it was the same for each one where I clamped it in, and then whacked it with a dead blow till it was the angle I wanted. So kind of a Neanderthal, but I don't really have a better way to do it. I was just getting the tacks on with no filler just to get them in place. So there's something interesting for you. I was using these little Neo magnets on the back side of the tabs to hold them in place. Now after welding, they're demagnetized. All that heat So I wipe them across and they just fall off. That's kind of disappointing. I had a little too much heat and I kind of cut a little notch out of there. That sucks. That right there. You can see it kind of screwed that up. Alright, so I was able to fix that little divot. Just kind of filled it in and then took the flap wheel on it. I had to reshape the little tombstone there for a little bit. Not perfect. You can definitely tell I hit it with the flap wheel here, but I was able to fix the big divot and then still leave some of the actual weld. It's all going to be painted, so I guess I don't need to obsess over it, but... Alright, so now what I'll do is I'll test fit the radiator again. Get this thing kind of where it needs to be. And then I'm going to make sure that this is like close to flush with the top. And then I will mark it. Mark the holes on the backside where I need to drill these things out. Can't really get in there perfectly with the Sharpie. Okay, so I did get this one drilled out. The marking was a little bit off center. So I actually just eyeballed it and made the hole center, and then I'll readjust on the hole in the radiator if I have to. This side actually turned out pretty decent. Looks pretty centered on the back side. I did just make a punch mark in here, and I'll just drill it out. Okay, so I did make a little change to this already. I drilled the holes out a little bit bigger than originally what I had. So my thought on this is a M16 by 1 bolt. This is like a rear oil pan bolt for the LS. So that fits through there now, the threads do. So this is also an M6 by 1 bolt. So I did that because I want to keep stuff simple, and basically everything that's holding this together is the same size bolts that are on the engine. So down here is a M10 by 1.5, so that's like all the same size as like the big accessory drive bolts. On the side here is a M8 by 125. That's like the exhaust bolts and like the timing cover bolt size. And then this M6 by 1 size is used for like the throttle bracket, the fuel lines on the stock intake, and quite a few other things. So trying to keep things simple, so I'll be able to use all the same tools for like working on the engine and working on the front if I have to remove it. Just trying to keep things simple. Just made a lightning quick run to the hardware store and I got some bolts. So these are M6 by 1. They have a 10mm bolt head, so the same size bolt head as the M8 by 125. And I just have the bolts in there and no nut on there, but I can already move the truck around with the radiator like that. I don't even have the nut on the back side of it. Another thing I did when I was talking about this bar on the back side, I know that the hardware store has this material here. This is 1/8 inch by 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch wide, 1/8 inch thick. And if you look, that is like the exact width of this little lip that's on here. So that's what I had, that's the idea that I had in my head. So I'm just going to cut this thing to the right length, and the thing is the exact height on the back side of this. So I'll cut it to the length it needs to be, drill some holes in it, then I'll be able to run the bolts through this, put the nut on the back side. And then I also picked up some little rubber washers. So I got a washer in between this bracket and the radiator, just for a little bit of softness. So let's work on that now. I do have to fix the holes a little bit because that one is in there crooked. I mean, that's why it's so tight in there right now. But this one isn't so bad, but I'm gonna take a little bit out on the radiator side and then we should be good. Guys, so I think I'm actually going to end the video here and get this one uploaded. I was going to do the intercooler, but I'll probably make a separate video on that. I'm happy with how this turned out. So I did make sure, like I think I mentioned that when I started, I loosened these up so this was able to lift up a little bit higher. So then what I did was I bolted this all together tight and then tightened these. So it actually does suck the radiator down a little bit and kind of wedges these bushings in there nice and tight. So I'll just take the radiator and I can move the whole truck now. Like, it doesn't really move. So it's in there nice and tight. I'm happy with how this is turning out. This little piece of 1/2 inch flat stock ended up working out perfect. And it's like the same exact height, so that's sweet how well that worked out. just cut it down and kind of rounded it off there where I did leave enough of a gap on each side that it's not going to be digging into the end tanks. And I did take it on the sander too and smooth that all out. Another thing I wanted to point out too is with the washers in there, I'll actually take my light off my camera here. With the washers in there, it does space it out enough to where the bar is not rubbing on the end tank either. So I wanted to make sure that it was tight up against there, but the end tank weld wasn't actually rubbing on the bar. So there you can see it a little bit better where the gap is. So it's actually not touching at all. So bubble level on the end tank, it's pretty much vertical. So it is still tilted back just slightly, but I'm not too worried about that. So I know this isn't really like super exciting stuff, but it's exciting to me and I'm enjoying working on it. So I've been kind of trying to take a little different approach lately, which I'm sure some of you guys probably noticed, where I'm not rushing through stuff like I used to, and I'm really just making sure that I'm taking my time to make things how I want them to be. And it's really just been kind of a mental shift, I guess, where I don't come out here unless I want to come out here. So I'm not going to come out and work on something unless I want to. So I know that sounds a little bit strange, but especially with doing YouTube stuff, like you can really get in the grind of like, I got to go make a video today. So I'm going to come out here and work on something even though I'm just miserable and I don't want to. So I've really been focusing on, if I don't feel like working on something, I'm not going to work on it. So just really focusing on like getting myself excited again to work on stuff. I will add a clarifier in there too, that like if you're a person that has a hard time getting motivated and getting your project done and coming out and working on stuff, it's a good idea to force yourself to get out and at least get a little bit of work done every day. I know like especially Matt from Sloppy and a lot of other people talk about 1 hour a day. It's a good idea, even if you just pick something small, go like 20, 30 minutes a day, go out and do something, get something done, and it'll start to snowball and you'll get there. So like for me, that's not really a problem. I don't really have to like talk myself into going out and working on stuff or try to find time to do stuff. It can actually be a problem for me on the opposite end where I'll focus so much on stuff and I'll just like grind to where it becomes a problem that I'm spending too much time on stuff. So when I say that I'm trying to focus on not coming out here unless I want to come out here, it's because I will get into that grind mode where I will work on stuff so much that it actually can become a problem on the other end. And then you just get burnt out and everything becomes miserable, you know? Because yeah, you guys know, like I did the whole budget thing on this and like just threw stuff together, and that's kind of why I'm changing a lot of stuff on here. And this whole project is basically just to get away from everything that was just kind of thrown together. And the way I like to describe it is like everything was an afterthought on the old build, because I originally did the NA swap and then I just added the turbos and added other stuff, and you change the fuel and add other things. Everything's kind of an afterthought, just added on top of other shit that was already there. So I know the videos aren't as fast-paced and projects aren't as fast-paced as they used to be, but I guess just know that I'm really enjoying myself and I'm having fun doing this. So that's kind of what's important. Next video will be the intercooler, and I got some cool ideas with that. I could chop that little stub off, weld that shut, and then I could come off the bottom of it even farther and make a little 90 off the bottom. So there's plenty of options. I can kind of do whatever I want with it. So that'll be the next video. We'll get the intercooler all situated.